Doubling effects can be a lot of fun in Magic the Gathering, but sometimes they go too far. Greetings, owners of fine luxury cardboard rectangles. We are here today to talk about Core 2021 spoiler action. Now, interestingly enough, today Wizards was what just happened there? I don't know. Anyways, Wizards was supposed to start the spoiler season today, but they've decided to delay it for a day. So as a result, we didn't get the blast of information from 2021 that we were expecting. As far as I'm concerned, there have only been 2 cards spoiled today. There are other cards floating around, but I don't particularly trust them yet, like the Teferi that takes an extra turn for 5 loyalty. I'm not convinced that's an actual card yet, so I'm just going to leave that to the side. If it turns out to be real great, we'll talk about it. And there's a couple other that they don't feel genuine. But we do have today a specific one of the actual genuine feeling spoilers that I wanted to talk about in terms of power level. So, you know what? Let's get the card up on the screen. We're looking at Double Vision. So this is a 2 red and 3 enchantment that says whenever you cast your first instant or sorcery spell each turn, copy that spell. You may choose new targets for the copy. And the flavor text says, your eyes aren't playing tricks on you, I am. So when it comes to the concept of cards that double, Doubling Season is a card that comes to mind that is also a 5-cost enchantment that doubles the number of counters and tokens that you would get to put into play. And that card has proven to be a big problem with Planeswalkers because basically it allows Planeswalkers to ultimate, right? So Doubling Season is so old that it was created before Planeswalkers existed as a card type, but the interaction between the two makes Doubling Season an incredibly potent card when you can just set a Planeswalker off right away. So that is in the area of too strong for standard. And to make sure we're all on the same page, that is the viewpoint that we are going to be taking a look at this card from. Is this card something like conceptually something that's too powerful for standard, or is this at an acceptable level? Now, some of you may be thinking about another red enchantment that has been a problem recently, and that's Fires of Invention, which allows you to play spells for free. And in a way, you could view this copying effect as playing spells for free. But there are some very, very significant and obvious differences between this and Fires of Invention. One is that this is limited to copying instant or sorcery spells. You have to have a spell originally to cast to get the copy, whereas Fires of Invention is just literally letting you cast your spells for free. Plus, Fires of Invention is useful right away. Double Vision, in the most technical sense, is useful as soon as you play it, but in a situation where you, let's say, play it on the 5th turn when you have 5 mana, you're going to have no mana to cast other spells. Like, if you wanted to benefit from casting a spell on this, you have to have at least 6 mana when you play it. If you had a 2-cost instant or sorcery, then you'd get to copy it the turn you played Double Vision, but you end up with a scenario where that's only a 2-cost spell. So really, is it that powerful? So I just wanted to compare it to some previous cards from Magic's history to give you some context. I guess before we do that, we should actually address the flavor concept behind this card, which is really, really cool. The idea here, I believe, is that normally with copying spells, you are copying the spell. So a lot of copy spells will show, look, in one hand, I have a fireball, and in the other hand, I have a fireball style concepts, right? Where it's very, very blatant what's going on. One spell copied into a second spell. If there's a lightning arcing through the sky, now there's twice as much lightning arcing through the sky. But this seems like whenever you cast a spell, the Planeswalker is actually causing like an extra version of themselves, like a clone of themselves, to show up for a moment and cast another copy of the spell. And once you lay this enchantment upon yourself, it enacts it. You can basically draw on its power over and over and over. And that's really cool conceptually. It is divergent from normal doubling of spell concepts, right? Honestly, when you think of this kind of artwork, this would be more at home, aside from the actual red magic flaring around, this would actually be more at home on a creature that is blue that copies another creature, right? Like it totally has the blue clone feel to it. but it's just a momentary sort of thing where you picture the planeswalker starts chanting or doing whatever gestures are necessary, drawing in the mana, whatever sort of theatrics go along with casting their spells, and another version of themselves kind of shifts out of them, doing the exact same movement, and then 2 copies of the spell come along. That is a really unique approach. Like, when I think about these kind of spells, originally, whenever a spell comes along, it has to have been concepted by a planeswalker, right? Like, some planeswalker had to come up with this. So most planeswalkers' ideas of copying a spell are going to be very simple, where it's like, okay, I learn how to make a fireball, I learn how to duplicate that fireball. I learn magic that can duplicate anything, but I do it with fireballs, or I do it with lightning bolts, and it's literally me generating just externally generating this extra copy, where this starts internally and creates 2 copies. It feels like a more artistic way to achieve the same ends. It's a very interesting concept. Like, are they mind linked at the same time? Is the copy like a shallow kind of imitation, just creating the gestures? Or does the copy, the extra version of you, have all your memories and everything that makes you, you? And at the end of it, is it actually you returning into it, or is it returning into you? Are you even you after? Like, I don't know, man. There's that one movie with that concept. What was it? Like, is it The Majestic or something like that? Where Hugh Jackman, you know, Wolverine, he's making like copies of himself, but at a certain point it's like, is he the original or is he just a copy? There's all these amazing questions that come up because of the flavor of this, but I'm not going to keep diverging like that. I said we would take a look at some examples of other cards that have similar style effects to kind of help gauge whether this card is too powerful. And a good one to compare it against would be Pyromancer's Ascension. This is a card that says whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell that has the same name as a card in your graveyard, you can put a quest counter on Pyromancer's Ascension. And whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, while the Pyromancer's Ascension has 2 or more quest counters on it, you may copy that spell and choose new targets for it. And the artwork, if you take a look at the artwork, this is exactly what I was talking about with most copy effects. You can see a triumphant mage who has ascended as a pyromancer, who is arcing out 2 gigantic gouts of like lava and fire on both sides. It's got that sort of symmetry to it. Interestingly enough, the art is a little off to the side, so you don't have the character in the middle with perfect symmetry, but the spells have a very rough symmetry, and you can tell that that is a doubling effect. And that is the norm, which really helps to accentuate the flavor of the actual double vision. But anyways, this is a card where you get the ability to copy your spells. It only costs 2 to put out. However, you have to meet these restrictions that are actually not the easiest hoops to jump through, right? You have to be casting spells that are already in your graveyard. So you have to have previously cast, if it's a lightning bolt, for example, this would have to be your second lightning bolt. And you have to meet those conditions twice to trigger the Ascension. So the Ascension is cheaper to get out, but harder to get going. And the Ascension will copy each spell from that point onwards. So it does have that differential as well. Now, a card that's similar in a way to this one is Pyromancer's Goggles. It's a 5 casting cost artifact, and these are basically like Chandra's Goggles, right? So you tap the card, add a red mana to your mana pool. When you use that mana specifically to cast a red instant or sorcery spell, you copy that spell, and you may choose new targets for the copy. Now, this one's restricted specifically to red spells, but does also accelerate into it. So it is more restrictive, but it does make it so you can actually cast the spells a little faster, a little more efficiently. So it's not like it's a direct comparison, but this is a similar sort of scenario because the double vision does trigger on the first casting, right? So that seems like a fair comparison. And I mean, Pyromancer's Ascension compared to Pyromancer's Goggles feels a lot stronger once you get it going, but you have the more hoops to jump through. So they both have their own kind of like balancing mechanics. And I mean, if you really want to go all the way back to like the oldest style of copying your spells, you could look at Mirari, right? I mean, it also costs 5 and it's an artifact, but it basically makes it so whenever you play an instant or sorcery spell, you can pay an additional 3 to copy it. And the Mirari is definitely not too powerful, and that ability is reusable, but it's also obviously makes your spells much slower by adding 3 mana onto the cost. So the Mirari is a cool nod to the past, and actually a really interesting part of Magic's history that we will be talking about in lore videos. But the Mirari obviously is the lowest end of the power scale for this, to kind of give you a gauge. You know what I mean? I think that Pyromancer's Ascension is the strongest of the copy effects we're talking about of the comparison cards. And Pyromancer's Goggles come somewhere in the middle, Mirari being the weakest. Now, after taking a look at these examples, I feel like Double Vision is one of those cards that at first, when you look at it, gives you that gut punch of, wow, this will copy anything. And you think of doing insane things like casting an ultimatum and having it go off twice or whatever. Like your brain conjures up these insane scenarios where it's going to be so busted and so good. But at the end of the day, you're having to pay 5 mana for this effect to start with. It only triggers once a turn. And yes, you can take advantage of that by casting instants on your opponent's turn and doubling those as well. But I feel like comparatively overall, the fact that it's only usable once a turn reins in the power level. The casting cost of it makes it so that this isn't going to start to have a real effect until later in the game. Let's be real. Standard is a fairly rapid feeling format at this point, and paying 5 mana for a card that doesn't do anything right away when you put it down feels like it's not going to be blazingly fast enough to smash up Constructed, where really only the most powerful cards survive. So I think for me, the end verdict on this is no, it's not too powerful. What level of strength is it actually at is what I'm genuinely curious about at the end of the day. Is it going to turn out that I'm wrong and this card actually becomes a problem? Is it going to turn out that this card is a sweet spot power card where people go, you know what, this feels good. I don't like it when my opponent gets it out, but it's not like an automatic loss either. It's sort of a in-betweenish. Or is this actually just going to turn out to be a card that at first glance is like, wow, and then after a bit you go, wow, you kind of impressed me when I saw you, but at the end of the day, you're like a bulk bin kind of rare. Well, what are we actually looking at here? Either way, the concept behind the double casting where you pull another version of yourself out of yourself for it is just, that's top level flavor. And I really, really dig that. So I said there was 2 cards, right? The second card is actually a legendary character that has a bunch of backstory in Magic. So I'm going to go and work on a video talking about a bunch of lore tied in with that. It's going to be more involved than this video was, but I did want to talk about this spoiler and get it out there while I spend the time necessary to give our mystery legendary character the proper treatment. If you like what I'm doing here, go ahead, subscribe, hit the like button. If you really like what I'm doing here, this channel is fan funded. So if you want to support it, jump on the Patreon like these fine people who are scrolling by on the screen. Thanks for coming by, everybody, and I'll see you later today for a lore spoiler video. It's going to be great.